Hey Wargamers, welcome back to the channel, Death from Above Wargaming. I'm Aaron, and I am back again with some more exciting Battlytics action. Tonight, we're going to look at the Quickdraw QKD-8K. So we're getting a new Quickdraw in the Kickstarter, and I realized we haven't actually looked at the Quickdraw yet. This is a quintessential BattleTech design. How have I not analyzed this guy before? So I went through all the various quick draws. I wanted to find one that was kind of new, fresh, one I haven't really looked at before, one that I haven't used before. And I found that this guy here, the 8K, I found this in Mech. It turns out this is in the TRO 3050 upgrade. It's a 3064 design, sort of brought up to speed with some of the latest technology from that late clan invasion era tech, bleeding into the Civil War era. It's a pretty cool design. It's not overpriced. So let me tell you about it, and then we'll see how it does in the simulations. So first and foremost, battle value 1583. I like it. It's not crazy. This is a 60-ton mech. So we just looked at the Merlin 60 tons. This guy's 60 tons. Interesting to see how they stack up. It moves 5'8", and it does jump 5, so that's classic quick draw for you, so nothing changed there. It does pack double heat sinks, so 24 double heat sinks. Standard fusion engine, which I love. It's got endo steel and ferrofibrous, so great stuff going on there. It does have only 8 tons of armor, which I don't love. I would have loved to have seen a little bit more there. 147 pips, so it's 73.1% coverage. I like to see about 75 to 80%. That makes me feel good about my life if I'm going to be riding in the head of a giant walking robot. But we'll see how this guy does in the defensive sims. Actuators, it's got all its fingers and toes. It can punch, it can grab, it can rip trees out of the ground and hit your opponent over the head. Very fun and exciting. And then in terms of an armament, it sort of resembles a quick draw. It's got some beams and it's got some missiles. It has 4 ER medium lasers. Now, these are inner sphere variety ER mediums. 5 damage, 5 heat. They shoot 12 hexes. They're okay. 1 on the left arm, 1 on the right arm, 2 in the left torso. Then on the other side, on the right torso, it's packing a meaty MRM-30. This is it's a questionable weapon. It sprays a ton of missiles out, but they're not great, right? Like the guidance isn't there. They just, I don't know, the range isn't tremendous. 15 inches, 15 hexes. It's got a weird, it's like 3 to short, 8 at medium, and then 15 at long. So it's very weird in terms of how that works. And if you are playing with extreme range, fun fact, the way it's written, or at least the last time I'd seen it written, you double your medium range value to get your extreme range value. So your extreme range would only be 16, 1 hex further than long. So kind of a weird weapon in that regard. Anyway, it's got 16 rounds in the right torso for that missile launcher, so more than enough to carry it through at least a single battle. I don't know. I don't know what my initial instincts say here. I think it'll probably be average, but maybe it'll surprise me, or maybe it'll underperform. I think a lot of it is going to depend on that MRM and how much damage it can do, how well it can actually do on the offensive side. So we'll take a look at that first. But guys, stay tuned. Battlytics, the whole shebang. It's coming your way on the quick draw. Sit tight. And we're back, ready to dive into the quick draw, the offensive benchmarks to start. So the first thing I notice is that heat curve. Like, woo, this thing can get hot quick. Starting at 12 inches, as soon as those lasers come into play, this thing can build up 7 points of heat per turn with an alpha strike. That's significant. Now, damage doesn't come on until 15 inches or 15 hexes when that MRM-30 comes into play. And then it slowly starts to creep up. Now, looking at the damage numbers in the bar chart at the bottom, so our baseline damage, which is calculated by basically not exceeding 4 points of heat at any point in time, you can get 146.6 points of damage. if you squeeze it a little on the heat scale and you try to optimize this thing, you can get 152.1 points of damage. So you don't get much more. It's a gain of about just under 4%. But if you just hold all the buttons down and fire everything and get up to that red line, but don't shut down, you'll only generate 64.7 points of damage. That's not very good over those 12 turns. So, first and foremost, whenever I see this, I like to say not for beginners, right? You have to understand the mechanics of the game, how to work that heat scale, when to alpha strike, when to duck behind cover and cool off. That's going to be very, very important for this mech to be effective in the long haul. Now, in terms of lethality, it doesn't blow me away, no pun intended. It only killed the Javelin 56.1% of the time. That's definitely subpar. And what's crazy is if you look at the cumulative kills, the kills don't really start coming on until it's like at point blank range. Like really like, was that 6-7 inches? That's when that the kills start coming on. So I don't love it. I don't love that curve. But let's take a look at the other numbers. So up top there in that pie chart. So majority of kills were CT core outs. Only 3.4% of the time we're looking at engine kills. And then 7.8% of the time we're getting head kills, which I want to call this out, is very, very interesting because 4 of its weapons only do 5 damage. And then it's got this massive shotgun with the MRM-30. So what I'm assuming is, you are able to get some headshots. You're generating headshots. You're generating criticals. Check out the crit number, 4.16. That's almost 33% more than average. So this is one of those mechs. It's kind of funny. I didn't do this intentionally, but we talked about the Merlin. It's like, hey, big chunks of damage. I like that. This is the kind of mech I might pair with it, where you've got a big MRM or something along those lines, and it can find those criticals. It's not necessarily a kill machine, but it's certainly dangerous enough that you're going to find those chinks in the armor. You're going to generate those criticals, and you're going to get your bang for buck that way. So offensively, I'm not really seeing a ton here. Your average damage per hit, 4.6. It's okay. Your average time to kill, 12.22 on a 30-ton mech, half your size. That's not great. But the critical number, I think there's something to that. But let's take a look at the defensive numbers. Again, 73% armor coverage, but it does move at a 5.8, so it's going to get that +3 target mod. That's going to help out a lot. Let's see how it shakes out. All right, so here we are on the defensive side. Now, I do want to caveat something about the offensive piece before we get too deep here. We talked about that number, right? The baseline, which was 152.1. Actually, the baseline was 146. The optimized was 152. Mechs that are in that category, right? Other things that you might be familiar with. I got it over here. So things like the Grim Reaper, the Awesome 8Q, the Bushwhacker, a Kit Fox, Penetrator, they're all in that sort of range there. Even the Victor 9K or 9D, same mech, 164.4. So it's not bad. It's not bad. It's just not amazing, right? But again, a 60-ton mech, so it's doing as much as an Awesome. Like, it's not terrible. So just food for thought there. So maybe I am a little spoiled by some of these ilClan designs, like the Merlin, and then freaking Kraken, the Bane 7. That thing was bananas. Maybe I got to reset myself. So I did want to kind of bring up some of the numbers as a point of reference. Anyway, let's talk about the defensive stuff. So armor diagnostic. I love what I see. Under armored on the rear. That's how I like to roll. I mean, just don't be an idiot and keep your back protected. I think I'd rather have the armor on my front where I'm going to get shot 90% of the time. Like, yes, you can get outmaneuvered, but you're in a 5.8 mech that jumps 5. If you get outmaneuvered, you're either in like a complete scrum and the battle's gone to crap anyway, or you're just very bad at moving your mech. So I like it. I think it's really solid. Talking about the legs, mobility analysis, armor's okay. It's only taking motive hits 2% of the time. The average target mod over 12 turns in 10,000 simulations is 2.98. That's very, very high. It's basically 0.02 under its maximum, which is great. Interestingly, the leg slots are not packed out. So there's 2 roll again slots. So if you do get internal, you do get a critical hit, you're guaranteed to reduce the mobility of this mech. But again, it's pretty solid, all things considered, from a basically a target mod and a mobility perspective. Survivability on this mech is shockingly high, 93.4%. Like, I went back and I reran this simulation 5 different times, and every time it does come out slightly differently. Like, it might be 92.9, it might be 93.7, it might be 93.1. I could probably run 100,000 simulations and get it to converge. But really, the 93.4%, that's about average of where it is. And I mean, we're talking about tenths of a percent here, so not really too concerned about it. It's really, really high, and it's consistently high. It's not a fluke. It doesn't ever die from ammo, because it does have case, by the way. I don't think I actually mentioned that in the beginning there, but it does have case in the right torso, which is huge. So any ammunition explosions are going to be contained. There is no XL engine, which, can't say it enough. Love it. So you're not really going to die from an ammunition explosion. Engine deaths do happen. You can generate 3 critical hits through the CT. It happens very, very rarely, less than 1%. Most of the deaths are coming by eating through the center torso or the head. The center torso, it's got 22 pips of armor, 20 points of structure. So it's, it's survivable enough that I guess survivability, again, I don't understand it. I think the target mod plays a very, very big part in keeping this mech alive. Keeping it mobile is super, super critical. I bet you if I changed it to a 4.6 and reran, the numbers would be very low. I may actually do that now and let you know when we come back. But kind of interesting to see this thing with such high survivability numbers. Now, again, kind of going into the database and looking at other mechs that have a survival rate in that 93, that really high sort of percentile, like Cauldronborn, Starslayer, Highlander 2C, like, it's surviving up there with some of these mechs. The only things higher than it are like Stone Rhino, Kingfisher, Fafnir, and some other designs that are much higher there. So that's pretty impressive. Again, we've seen things much lower. I'm looking at that. I got stuff as low as the good old urban mech. That's fraction of a percent in terms of survivability. But there's tons of mechs, like even the Hammerhands, right? Or the Caesar 3R we just looked at recently, 39%. So I'm telling you that the fact that it's case, the fact that it's a standard engine, these things really, really matter when you're playing Classic and you're just hitting all these different locations. It makes a big deal. So very excited about the survivability. I was lukewarm on the offensive side, but then again, kind of looking at the database, kind of looking at where it sits with all the other mechs, it's not really that bad. So let's take a look at the efficiency. We'll see how it shakes out. All right, so here we are. We're going to look at the efficiency. So movie magic. I did actually run a whole new simulation just on the defensive side. I changed the movement to 4.6 with no jump jets. So just 4.6 with no jump jets. It drops the target mod down to 2, and then you don't have jump jets to fall back on if you take a leg actuator hit. The survivability dropped from 93.4% to 72.3%. So, when you look at BattleTech and you see like that funny little the classic picture of the dude in the academy and it says speed is life, like, it's true. The 2d6 probability curve is very, very cruel, and getting that extra bump from your target mod from 2 to 3, and then having those jump jets where you can claim a 3, if you're under, if you take a motive hit or if you can't catch it because terrain's in the way, that is absolutely huge for keeping this mech alive. So speed is in fact life. Battlytics has proven it. Now let's talk about the efficiency of this mech. Now, sadly, guys, the efficiency rating of this mech is only 6.67. Now, that's actually not bad, right? I'd mentioned this in the Merlin video. I just recently updated that efficiency curve in the bottom left to reflect all the mechs we've done all the way through 2023. And sitting close to 7 is very good. It's like the upper half of average, if not a little bit better than beyond just sort of that average, pack, that middle pack. So not bad. And again, considering the loadout, which is sort of weird, I'm pretty impressed with it overall. The really cool thing is the survivability makes it reliable. Your damage loss is only 2.9%. And that's only coming in very, very late when you get, close in. So you can get this thing, I think, dealing lots of damage. You can use those MRMs. You can get them in the mix, and you get your medium lasers in at 12 inches, 12 hexes. It's a good thing. It's definitely a good buy. And again, this is only 1600 battle value base with a 4.5 pilot. Now, all of our sims are run with a Gunnery 2 pilot, so it costs a little bit more. It would be 2216 if you ran it with a Gunnery 2 pilot, not factoring in the piloting skill adjustments that you would need to make. Typically, when we play like if you're a 2, you have to be a 4 in piloting. There can't be more of a 2 split, but Battlytics is only adjusting the BV for Gunnery in case anyone was wondering. I know I've gotten that question a couple times in the comments. So let's look at Gunnery sensitivity. This is an interesting one. Gunnery sensitivity is very, very, very high. 0.817. And you might say, Aaron, I don't get it. That's nonsense. I don't believe it. But I'll tell you why. It's because so much of your damage comes from that MRM 30 that if you miss with it, you're screwed. You gotta land your hits with the MRM 30. That is absolutely crucial to the success of this design. So in that regard, put a good gunner in it. Make sure they can hit things. If you don't, you will see significantly reduced efficiency from this design. So it goes from a 6.67 at Gunnery 2 all the way down, to a 4.77 at Gunnery 4. And that's not great. That's significantly below average, in my opinion. But what's also telling is the damage output from Gunnery 2 to Gunnery 4. It's about half, right? So you're doing about half as much damage with Gunnery 4 than you are at Gunnery 2. So that's a pretty significant improvement there. Now, as it gets higher, it does get a little bit better, but it doesn't double from 2 to 0. Like it only goes up, whatever that is, 147 to 223 according to the chart here. So about 80 points of damage or so. Now, let's take a look at the threat, the rolls, how I might play this thing on the table. So we know it's a decent buy at 6.67. It's definitely something I want to put in my force, but how would I use it? Let's see. All right, so here it is. Probably not a huge surprise on the first two rolls. I said brawler, I said cavalry. It's fast, 585. It can move, it can get over terrain, it can get where you want it to go, and you want it in close. It's almost a no-brainer. I think either of these two things are very good for this mech. This mech has no long-range capabilities. It doesn't shoot very far, so why not get it in as close as possible? And you can see from the threat assessment, the closer you get, the better. This thing has a pretty good peak alpha strike. It also has, again, it's only building up 7 points of heat at 12 inches, right? Once those ER mediums come into play, it's building up 7 points of heat per trigger pull. And again, just like once they come into play, right? So you go from a 30-point alpha strike, but put a little asterisk next to that, to a 50-point alpha strike. But again, you're talking MRM 30. You're at the mercy of that awful cluster hits table. So I want to talk a little bit about the average calculated damage, but let's get into just real quick. Let's get into the picket roll that I picked for this thing. So we talked about brawler and cavalry. That makes sense. I'm going to tell you where my head is on picket. So typically, like a picket mech is this like sort of small, annoying throwaway mech. I think like fleas, right? Where you just want to put them on something big and slow and annoy the living crap out of it. Maybe use a bunch of flamers, right? Just kind of like harassment type mech. I think the Quickdraw can play that role if it's the little guy in a big lance or in a big battle, because it's big, it's fast. And remember when we went back to if we jump back to like the offensive capabilities, the lethality index, that's the word I'm looking for. The crit hits were very high, 4.18 on that chart. So I'm thinking about, King Crab, like dropping Gauss rifles, because that's my favorite King Crab variant, Devastators, like things like this, like boring holes in mechs. And then this dude comes along, it's like MRM30, and, finds a bunch of crits, right? That's how I see this thing playing in that picket role. And it's fast enough that it can jump and get behind slower mechs, and it can unleash a pretty serious barrage into the rear arc of an enemy mech. So it can really be annoying because it's tough enough, right? And it's fast enough to fill that picket role. So if it is the little guy in an assault lance, think about it, in that context. I think being that like harasser, I think it could be very, very good in that role. So interested to know what you guys think. Definitely leave it in the comments. But let's talk about that threat a little bit more. I want to dig into the average calculated damage and zero heat average calculated damage, how that all looks. All right. So just a refresher, as it is 2024. So what is ACD? ACD, average calculated damage. Basically, it's just basic math, right? What's the number I need to hit? What's the damage that the weapon does? If there's a cluster hit table, what's the probability of what am I going to roll, right? It factors all that stuff in. It rolls it all up. It adds the various weapons together that are available at that specific range increment from 21 all the way down to 1. And voila, we get our chart. So zero heat ACD is like, all right, so now what if I shot everything and didn't build up any heat? Peak ACD is, all right, what if I shot everything? What would I get? And then Alpha Strike is, what if the dice gods have blessed me? Literally every cluster lands, everything hits. What's the maximum I can do? So they're the three different color bars: dark red, alpha, light red, peak ACD, and then the more white, sort of pinkish color is your zero heat ACD. So at 3 inches is where we're doing our best damage. Okay, that's where your ER mediums are at short range. Your MRM30, incidentally, also at short range. Finally, such a weird weapon. So at 3 inches, you're doing 24.2 with zero heat. If you fire everything, you're only doing 32.5. So it's not only, I guess it's a significant uptick, about 8 points of damage. And that would build up 7 points of heat. So is that worth it? That's up to you. But the peak Alpha Strike, again, is 50. So you're really only generating 65% of your maximum damage on average. So even though it's an MRM30, right, that's where most of your damage loss is coming from when it goes from that 50 to that 32.5. So I wish there were ways to make it more reliable in terms of missiles landing, but even still, all of the numbers that we saw today were based off this average calculated damage, so it's still pretty solid. But imagine how great it would be if you could really, like, if it was like a streak MRM30, this thing would be rocking people. It's not even a thing, but I wish it was. So anyway, moving forward, love the mech. All right, does really decent damage. Again, the optimized ACD, right? That purple chart we looked at in the efficiency, 152.1. Time to kill, not very great, but the sort of the silver lining there is the crit finding capabilities of this mech. It's got great survival. That's all due to thank God that speed, those jump jets. So very, very good. So overall, this is definitely a mech I recommend. The QKD-8K Quickdraw, very, very cool design. So I mentioned it before. I'll mention it again. Leave it in the comments. I always love reading what you guys think about these mechs. Tell me if you like the analysis. Tell me if you hate it. Tell me if you hate the mech. Tell me if you love it. Tell me if you've used it. Tell me if you have a more favoritist or quick draw in your arsenal or other comparable designs you think that might complement the quick draw in a lance. Love hearing all that stuff. In addition, if you could leave a like and subscribe, that would be very, very exciting. And a couple of things here, a couple of friends of the channel I want to call out. Number one, Aries Games and Minis. If you still have some holiday cash burning a hole in your pocket there, or if you just, you miss the holidays and you want to give yourself some presents, head on over to Aries Games and Minis. All the great stuff over there: minis, dice, books, novels, box sets, and he's got other vendors too: Fighting Piranha Graphics, Hardware Studios, all kinds of great stuff over there that you can find. Last but not least, Patreon. Guys, for those of you that are patrons, I just want to say thank you very much. Some of you have been patrons since the very, very beginning. And, you know, every month you've thrown us a couple of bucks, $5, $10, $1, whatever it may be. It's because of you that we are able to keep producing videos, hands down. Some of you have this idea that YouTube generates tons of money. And, you know, I probably live in a mansion somewhere like all those famous YouTubers. That is not the case. So it is Patreon, in fact, that is the large, overwhelming majority of the channel revenue. YouTube keeps stealing money from us. Thank you, YouTube. But thank you to all of our patrons for being supportive of us. And if you want to join them, guys, that's how we keep the lights on and we keep the cameras rolling. We upgrade our technology through our patrons. And as a little benefit, patrons get some perks, some features. They get to vote on the direction of the channel. They get to pick the mechs we look at in Battlytics. So there's lots of really cool things, the various patron tiers out there. So definitely check that out. But that said, I'm all done marketing. I got nothing more on the Quickdraw except for love. Really, really cool. Very excited about the new model. I'm looking forward to painting it up. I'm not sure which faction I'm going to paint it in yet. Maybe Free Worlds League. I don't know. What do you think? Leave it in the comments. Tell me what you think. The 8K is a Draconis design. At least it is later in the ilClan era. They're the only people that are fielding it. So I don't know. What do you think? How should I paint my Quickdraw 8K? Tell me. But that said, I'm all done. So guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review of the Quickdraw. And of course, stay tuned. Always great stuff coming from Death from Above Wargaming. Have a great night.